Great moments are born from great opportunity.
Football is about controlling that anger, harnessing that aggression into a team effort to achieve perfection.
It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great.
Back once again, Bubs. Here we go, episode 3. We're coming to you virtually from Zoomland. We touched on parents on the last episode, and we're gonna put them all together. We talked about us on the first episode, talked about parents on the second episode. Now we're really getting into the nitty gritty of what we want to talk about, and that's coaches and coaching. So that's what we're going to with this episode. First thoughts as we get going.
Yeah, I think we decided episode of They Call Me Coach, right?
They call me coach.
They call me coach. We talked about just the influence of being a coach. Jess, I think the quote that you put out in episode 1 is a coach will impact more lives. Did we say within a year?
In 1 year, a coach will impact more lives in 1 year than the average person will in a lifetime.
Which is, absolutely true. We looked at the platform a coach has. I think we don't talk about that enough, especially, youth level is important, but when you get to the high school, I don't know, Jess, how many kids did you have in your program over at Lincoln?
We averaged probably about 50 to 60 throughout the program where we were at, yeah.
No, that's a lot of future leaders of the world, man, that you were able to impact in some way. And I think it's just an important platform that we talk about for sure.
And then same thing on the baseball side, right? Like you're not only doing high school, which is probably around 45, 50, but then you're going club, which is now with your club, now you're going K through 12, right? So
yeah, it's a different magnitude for sure. We're going 9 years old all the way up to 18-year-olds, and then we got it on the boys baseball side and the softball side. So those numbers double up. So yeah, I think it's an extremely important platform. And yeah, Jess, we talked about it a little. We kind of got our backgrounds episode 1. I'm sure you've had the question from numerous friends, people outside of the sports world on why you coach.
Yeah.
Tell me a little.
That's really what this is all about. And the why. When I first got into coaching, when I stepped onto the coaching scene at 18 at UNC, it was all about just staying connected to the game, because that was how I identified. I was Jesse, the football player, Jesse, the quarterback. And I think all athletes, no matter when you stop playing, go through that struggle of who am I outside of this game, because it's such a big part of us. And so when I first started, it was about football and it was about winning, right? I wanted to be the best, and that never changed. But as I adapted and as I grew and as I kept learning, and I learned about what impact I can really have with youth, and then going back into our community, I started to narrow my focus down and really become purposeful in my coaching. And that purpose for me was to prevent the broken home, right? I had a chance to be involved with young men who maybe have been misguided, maybe come from single parent households, but I had a chance to have an impact. And so my purpose became preventing what I call the AA club. That's the addict and the abuser, because in my mind, that really breaks homes down. So if I could do something in that arena where I can prevent kids from becoming addicts, like my father was, and so many of my family members were, or abusers where the mom leaves because they're being abused or something like that. If I could have just some type of impact there, then I felt like I was doing something good.
Oh, I think that's key though, is we talk about it, like, until you're in the root of it, like everything between the lines or inside the fence is somewhat secondary until you're doing things outside and the kids are buying in community based, if that makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
And I know where you were at Lincoln, that was a big part. Like, I'm a Lincoln alum. I know when by the time you got there, the demographic, it changed a little, not too much, but there wasn't really outside structure. There wasn't that. And just me thinking myself alone, just like we didn't have 6 a.m. workouts. We weren't doing the 7-on-7. I know you were just making sure it was as full circle as you can get it there. And once the kids bought in, it made it a lot easier. Your journey was easy, right?
Yeah, and I got some really really good advice from a coach in my first year, and the tendency is, I want to be successful, right? I want to have success. My first year as a coach, head coach at Lincoln, we could have averaged 275 across the front line, and we're playing 5A football.
Right.
The issue was those 275 kids, those really big kids, they weren't doing the things necessary outside of football, and they weren't even showing up to football practice. So I got some really good advice, and the advice was, you're gonna win with them, and you're gonna lose without them. Like, it's gonna be the same no matter what, because we weren't established enough as a program to really push ourselves beyond that limit. So going 275 across the front line was just all for show, and
Right.
it really wasn't gonna make an impact on the wins and losses if I would have kept them. So you get one chance to make that first impression as a coach. And one thing that you have to do is you have to set a standard early. You have to know, this is who we are. This is what we're about. And this is how we're going to go about our business. And anybody that's not on board with that, anybody that's not come to your team to work in that way, you got to cut ties with them. And it's hard because our kids, especially at Lincoln, came from some really tough situations, right? And it was, I got to go watch my baby sister. I got to go work. I got to, the excuses came on and on and on. By the time I got to the end, one thing that I would always say, I was like, listen, I understand life happens, and that might cause you to miss a practice maybe once a week, maybe here and there, right? But if life is happening too often, if life is happening over and over again, life is telling you that you shouldn't be a high school football player. Life is telling you that you shouldn't play high school sports, because there's a commitment that has to happen. There's a commitment that has to happen. And then by the time I got to the end of my at Lincoln, my saying was, if you leave this program, you will understand what it means to make a commitment. If nothing else, if you don't understand how to play football, if you don't understand anything else, you will understand what it means to make a commitment, because that's going to be the key to your success beyond the field.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, those are all positive things that is beyond the game, man.
And then, on the flip side, Bubs, let's talk, because that's part of it, right? And that's, in my opinion, the most important part is to have your why.
Sure.
And I want you to talk about your why a little bit. And then when you're done with that, let's talk about the other part, because there's an art and a science to coaching. And I think you do both of them very, very well. And I have experience with you as a coach and helping me out with my son. And so let's talk about that art and science. But first, tell us, what's your why?
So my why early, I mean, I don't want to say it's ever changed, but I know my why coming right out of college was I was really, really concerned about the wins and losses, extremely concerned. And then, after my story in episode 1, I was more angered because of the situation on where we landed with coaching after somebody telling you no, so that motivated me a little different. But my why was absolutely developed at Jefferson High School. And my why was just to be able to provide an opportunity for youth to blow beyond their goals with the program that I was structuring, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I took over numerous programs where, like, you saw the turnover in coaches. So a lot of these kids were just doing the bare minimum, thinking that it was okay. It was okay just to be a part of it. I was assigned a uniform. It was okay to be in that culture and say I was a baseball player. I just enjoyed giving as many life lessons through athletics as I could. I think I established, accountability, communication, and commitment. Those were the 3 things that I've been saying at every meeting I could since my days at Jefferson. I went to Colorado Academy with those 3 core values, and I definitely went to Chatfield with those values. And believe it or not, here at Metro, like I make sure we have those values. And these are men now. These are guys, Jess, I'm coaching dudes with fiancés and living with spouses. Like, it's a different world. But I think those 3 words really helped shape and mold the why of how I was spending my time with the athletes. Something that I know that was extremely important was, all the pieces and stuff you did inside with the community, rather than the wins and losses on the field. I think the athletes we're coaching today, they want to know you care, man. And all the things that I was doing, like you mentioned, with the food baskets, and we were doing toy drives, and we had just a million other things going on. It really won over them. And you were able to see just a different part of the athlete. We use the word athlete a lot, but they're still kids, man. We're developing young men. And at the time, we really wanted them to be really high character young men. And it was never about what practice plan I rolled out. It was about what we were doing as servant leaders for our community that I thought was really, really important.
Yeah. Just to stick on this why concept for a second, a lot of coaches that I've observed that I see, their why is strictly the win. And what happens when that is your only why? This is the trickle down effect of I want to win, I want to win, I want to win. Number one, it's the win at all costs, right? So at the youth level, you're talking about recruiting 10 and 11-year-olds, reaching across town and bringing in the best kids. Meanwhile, this kid that is in your neighborhood isn't getting coached and he's being told that he can't do it, right? So
right.
It brings on this mentality of win at all costs, which again, I don't ever talk about winning. I talk about the process to get to a win. The commitment, the hard work, we used to call it, and we took this from Urban Meyer. I know he's out there kicking kickers now, but he's one of my main guys that I go to. But he talked about 4 to 6 A to B. Every football play is 4 to 6 seconds. You got to be able to get to, and it has a starting point and an end point, A to B, right? Yeah. So if you can be as fast as you can from point A to point B in 4 to 6 seconds, you're going to be successful. So we harped on those things, right? The commitment. Like you said, the accountability.
Yeah, it's the detailed parts of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of saying we got to win the game, like, everybody wants to win, Bubs. That's if you're standing at the top of your mountain screaming, "We got to win the game." What are you teaching them to win the game? Because if all you're teaching them is, "I just got to go find the next best athlete," which you can do at the youth level, right? You've been on youth fields for a long time. If you have a really dominant pitcher, or if you have the fastest kid on the field, you're likely going to win that game because, that there's just a big separation of talent. But what are you giving your kids to move on to the next level, whatever that next level is? That's the big question.
Yeah, just being at the facility majority of the time, man, I see a lot of coaches that are really proud recruiters rather than being developers. And that's just a culture that I think is more common now, man. It's let me go get the best kids from the area rather than let me get some kids that I know I can develop. And we talk about it all the time, just like the consistency in teams, right? Like people are jumping ship, thinking the grass is greener from every sport every year. And it wasn't like that with us growing up, right?
No, we played, like we've said it before, I was a Pal Hockey or a Pal Redskin, and the Redskins were based out of Houston Park. The Hawks were based out of Sloan's Lake. And that's where everybody in that area went to. And I'm sure, Bubs, like I'm sure there was some recruiting that went on with it. But I think you hit the nail on the head. It's being a developer rather than a recruiter. I remember having this thought as a head coach, I could go out and recruit kids and get them to come to me. And what comes with that is making promises to parents, right?
Right.
If I'm going out and I'm telling parents, I promise your son will play varsity at this time, blah, 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 blah. And to me, I'm never a promise maker. I will never make promises. The only promise I make is that you'll have opportunity to work hard and earn a spot. Yeah. And so I made a decision, and right, wrong, or indifferent, or some people will say that it was wrong of me because I didn't help the team, but I'm going to coach those kids that were in that neighborhood and that came to that school. And my hope was that as I did right by those kids and our program grew and the culture grew, eventually the good athletes or the better athletes or whoever, whatever the case may be, would come to us without me having to, I promise you're going to play this. And connecting that back with parents, you got to be cautious of coaches who are out there promising you the world, because it's just not a smart way to go about athletics.
Right. Well, my thing is like, if you're getting that recruitment type talk at the youth level, let's say your son doesn't have a dynamic year. like that coach has already showed true colors on just going out and getting the next best thing, you
Hmm.
know. And I think I see that more regularly than not. You know, I see people bragging, "Hey, my team's based out of Thornton, and we got two kids from Colorado Springs at the 11U level." You know,
Yeah.
like I see that, man, and it's just the dynamic that's established at the youth just makes it a lot tougher at the high school level for those coaches, and then it makes it extremely tough for us college guys. You know, those guys really have never stuck through or been through and through with teams, as common as it was when we played.
Yeah. And then at the youth level, Bose, when you got your coach that's making those promises, what they're not teaching is what it takes to be successful at the next level, right? So if you need commitment, number one, you need accountability, number two, you need to understand that practice is going to be every day.
Right.
You're not going to have practice Monday, Wednesday, Friday, play a game or whatever the case
Right.
may be. It's
Right.
every day and there's a grind. And then the other part that comes with it is school, right? So
Right.
when we have the episode where we talk about club sports and what that's doing to educationally based sports, the two aren't mixing very well right now. Like we're mixing eggs and I don't know, steak or something. No, that's probably pretty
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, it does sound good. No, yeah, you're 100% right though. It's just two different worlds. And on the club side or on the recruitment side, it's, it accommodates them the best, right? That's all.
Yeah,
It's the best for them at that time where, you know, back when we played, man, pal wise, like you were dealt those cards, we had to make the best hand with those cards. And that was the enjoyment of coaching, in my opinion, you know?
absolutely. Absolutely. So, we talk about recruiting, you have an issue with the recruiter because of the promises that you're making to kids and the bad habits you're teaching. Because I had so many kids who were the best players on their PAL teams
Right.
before PAL went down. They would come to us and they would fizzle out within a year of freshman football because they were always told how great they are. They were always told all these things about how amazing they were. They're the best athlete on the field and you just got to show up. Like they would let them miss practices, let them show
Right.
up on game day, and they go dominate because they're the best athlete on the field. That's not sustainable once you get past the youth level. Once you get past little league, that's not sustainable and it's not realistic. If your real aspirations are to play beyond high school or even at high school, if your aspirations are to play at high
Right.
school and then beyond, those types of things, you really got to be cautious about that.
No, you're 100% right. And that's just the importance of quality coaching at the youth level. You know, we get back to that. Like on the baseball side, you wouldn't believe, how many kids would come in and say, "Hey, I played majors, the highest division possible, all my life at the youth level. Why is there a double A kid starting ahead of me as a freshman?" Well, in all honesty, that double A kid probably had the better coaching, maybe didn't see the elite competition the whole time, but knew the detailed parts of the game. And that counts at the high school level to get on the field, right?
Absolutely.
You know, that coach probably had 4 days a week practice and he didn't have the label. And I think that's the biggest discussion I have nowadays is just the label community. Hey, I play majors, I play AAA. Like as a high school coach, Jess, did you ever ask one of your athletes, "Hey man, what was your little league record?" None of us
No,
cared. None of us cared, right? I didn't
no.
care how many trophies you had. What I didn't care. I cared if you knew what a double cut was, if you can get out there and bump a ball in a key situation. I cared about the detailed parts. And I don't think coaches, or again, we get back to recruiters, really have that detailed work down. You know, I haven't ran across that yet on the baseball side.
No, no, I would get kids who won youth championships, who were the best players on their team. They couldn't get into a 3-point stance. They didn't know positions, Bubs, and I'm talking basic positions. Go play guard. Which
Yeah.
one's that? The one next to the center, kid. Like, how did you win championships and you don't know what a guard or a tackle? And
It's true.
that stuff was astonishing to me. So we get these kids, and then we're supposed to do it. When you get to that level at the high school, you don't have that much time to develop them, right? And that's why you
Right.
see success at some of the bigger schools because they have this system where the youth coaches are developing them. They are developmental leagues for the high school. Where what I really think the issue is in the inner city is we're recruiting We're great recruiters at the youth level, but we're not great developers, to your point that you made earlier tonight, right? We don't develop our kids. And so then we send them to high school. And then what happens to high school? We had some great teams in youth that dominated their football leagues. And then
Right.
what happens? They're trying to go to the bigger school because it's a bigger name, or you're coming to the school and you don't have the tools to get through high school and you don't have the skills to get through a season, and it fizzles out.
100% right. Just that's just the importance, man. This whole topic is just making sure that you're bought into developing if you're getting into coaching. And I think, the word loyalty, I think we don't use as much, but, stay loyal to those kids. I know there's always going to be the bigger, better picture, but I promise you helping develop, like I told the youth guys, when I was at Chatfield, man, we had a great feeder program, Jess, and a lot of our successes, dude, I would 100% give kudos to those youth coaches because, like you mentioned, a lot of the detailed parts of the game we don't have time for.
Yeah.
We got 4 years with these guys. We have so many, at that time we had 4 levels, man. Like we were playing a lot, and a lot of the detailed parts were because they had good youth coaches.
Yeah.
I didn't take credit in that at all, but everyone understood their part. That was the key to it all. And I think that's what's big with funneling systems. We talk about DPS all the time. When you mentioned just a little while ago that, you were hoping you were getting some of those athletes that wanted to go to Lincoln, I think the right wording would have been they wanted to stay at Lincoln because there were kids 3 blocks, 4 blocks from your school district that were probably going to Bear Creek or some of these Jeffco schools.
Mm-hmm.
And you made it intriguing where we can do it here.
Yeah.
We can do it here because you were bought into the development. You were bought into the big picture. And I think that's key,
And I really believe this in all honesty. What would happen with those kids is they would go to the suburban schools, Bear Creeks, the Columbines, try to get into Mullins. Like that was the talk, right? I'm going to go to these bigger schools because that's where I'm going to get recruited. Right. What would happen in a year or two is they would fizzle out over there, and a lot of them would come back. But at that point, when you come back, now you've lost 2 years because you weren't playing. You probably didn't stay out. I don't know. That's kind of wrong of me to say. Not that you didn't stay eligible, but maybe you didn't meet the expectation over there, or you saw that the grass wasn't greener and you wanted to come back, and now you've lost a year or two. Where I really believe if you take one of those really good youth teams and you stick them in a high school, pick a high school in Denver, and you stay there and you keep them there, they can have success at the high school level with the right coach.
Yeah, with the right coach, with the right development, all of those are key factors, but you're right. And I think we kind of see that, give a little love out to like George Washington, probably like Montbello, TJ. I think they do a good job of retaining a good portion of their athletes. Yeah, they lose a couple, but I don't think it's anything rivaling the Southwest Denver corridor, right? Yeah. I think we have a lot of good athletes in that area that are not going to the schools they probably should.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best one in the city right now is Denver South that's doing it, and it's showing on their from a football standpoint. It's showing on their record from a football standpoint, and the sustainability of what they've done with the DPS Futures League and all that development. I think Denver South is probably doing it the best that I've seen.
Nice. Yeah, key to keep them together, man. Just buy into the process, right? If we're asking the parents and the kids to do that, as a head coach, you better make sure you're in on 2 feet with that also.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go. We're at the mound visit, Bubs, and we're at halftime. What we want to do for this episode is give some coaching tips, but some real coaching tips that a baseball coach, whether at the youth level or the high school level, can take away with them after listening to this episode and apply it. Maybe it's some things that you live by, or just some little skill things that you like to harp on. Give us your mound visit and the adjustment.
So my mound visit, visiting a ton of athletes that want to play at the collegiate level. Jess, I was able to tour a lot of states this past couple summers, and I just think the 3 important factors. So I have an 8th grader, I have a 6th grader. Baseball is as basic as can be, man. And if you can't play catch at 90 feet, to make a high school roster, it's going to be extremely tough for you. And I could not harp alone. Like me owning a facility, I get a lot of parents that come in and they're like, man, my kid's 10 and he wants personal instruction. He wants that. And we're great. We'll do anything you need, like great facility to do that with. But half the time I'm like, you just need to play catch with your kid in the backyard, man.
Yeah.
Like we don't need to compound or make the equation harder than it is. Baseball is pretty repetition based. And the guys that play at the highest level just fall in love with the repetition. We can't reinvent the wheel. Similar with football, I'm sure there's different schemes and tactics, but it comes down to the same basic X's and O's, right?
Yeah.
We can put bells and whistles on everything on the baseball side. I can rename a drill 10 different names and tell you the Yankees use it, but everybody uses it,
Mm-hmm.
So keeping it basic is the biggest thing that I just like to emphasize to parents nowadays, man. Like, it ain't about velocity. It ain't about, how the exit velocity is off of your kid's swing. It's make sure your kids enjoy the game. Make sure they're asking to play at a high level. Make sure it's their vision and not the parents' vision. And then 2, just the throwing program, man. If there's any tip I can give, I even think college athletes right now they don't play catch well, Jess. And it's crazy to see that. And I know you look at me like you're crazy, man, but I remember at the high school level, we'd have a warm up, and if we didn't get through our throwing warm up flawlessly, we wouldn't move on to anything else. It was really important just to play catch, man. So all you parents out there listening now know it's important to get them in the backyard. They don't need a coach to do it. They don't need a brother or sister. They can toss it against the fence or play catch with you, so.
How hard is that as a coach, Bubs? Because we believe these things thoroughly, and we've practiced these things and we've done these things. But how hard is that as a coach if your practice isn't going well? They're not playing catch at 90 to sit there and stick with that.
Dude, it took me about a week straight until I'm not lying to you, Jess. My kids would show up 10 minutes early to practice in order to get some throwing in before our drills would even start. So I knew they were automatically bought in when they were like, coach is a stickler. We're not going to progress to any type of stuff unless we can get the basics down, right? Yeah. Like everyone wants to hit, everyone wants to see machines, everyone wants to get there. I used it as like, this is a reward if we're doing the right things to get there,
Yeah.
Where I think a lot of coaches like, and here's the crazy thing, quote unquote, players coach. Like, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little. Like the players coaches are going to jump into that right away. Where, I'm a little old school with it, man. We're going to earn everything we have. And I knew the necessities to compete at a high level, and playing catch was one of them, but it was cool to see the kids buy in, it was cool to see how important it was in practice, because if it was important in practice, it was second nature in the games. We do it with our eyes closed, it was very, very easy. So the progression was great.
And how much at the youth level in baseball, right? How many runs are scored from overthrows and from pass balls and things like that?
You're looking, almost every run, man.
Yeah.
Let's think about that. Like you tell the guys, if they can't field it, throw it, and catch it, like you have no chance. I don't care how many runs you score in a game. Like you're always going to be in a dogfight. If you can play catch, half the game becomes a lot easier. Your plate appearances become a lot easier. It's just buying into that though, just the quality of catch play in youth and in high school and in college is not what it used to be.
Yeah. Last thing, and then I'll get to my halftime adjustment. When I was going and I was hiring a baseball coach, I called you and I asked you, I said, what are your 3 mainstays in your baseball program? Playing catch at 90 was one of them. What were the other 2 that you told me?
I believe the other 2 that I said my mainstays were just making sure that every practice was active as can be, right? So I hate lines, Jess. I have some of the biggest winter camps indoor wise around. We'll have 60, 70 kids inside my facility, and I tremble. It's just a pet peeve of mine to have any type of line. So there's always some drill or always some motion going on, right? And I think that's key, is just keeping the kids active at all times. I think my third motion that I told you was just making sure the developmental side on the pitching aspect was key, like arm care and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like baseball like you have to finesse and have your body in a certain performing mode that coaches have to buy into, if that makes sense to you, right? Just playing catch, long toss in, having just some throwing regimen, I think is what I told you. He has to come with just some type of chart saying, hey, this is how I'm going to get my kids prepared at all times. And then I briefly talked about the practice planning, Jess. Important part of coaching at all levels, man. I don't care if you have a 10-year-old team, we've got to have a plan all the time. Every kid we come across is extremely smart, Jess. 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds know if coaching staffs are disorganized or kind of just flowing through stuff and there's really no structure, right? Yep. And that leads to them being unstructured. A quick tidbit, I don't want to talk too much, Jess, but I went to a camp out in San Diego, and I was able to work with the guy from Cal State Fullerton, man. This guy, all seniors in high school, it's 2022 class, this was last year, would not hit a ground ball off of his fungo if the people in line were not in a straight line. That's how stickler he was. He said, if it's a sloppy line, it becomes a sloppy drill. And I'll have that forever in my mind. And I've kind of took that into my coaching aspect, that even the lines at the collegiate level, Division I, had to be straight or there was no drill going on because of that mindset,
Yeah, I'm glad you hit on the lines, because that's one of my big pet peeves too on the football side of things. And my halftime adjustment, I'm gonna gear more towards the youth level of what I'm seeing down at the youth level of football. And I'm gonna be flat out honest right now, Bubs. If I was a kid, if I was a kid right now and I knew nothing about sports, and I was a parent and I knew nothing about sports, but I wanted to get my kid involved in something, and so I did a tour of sports out there and I wanted to get him involved, football would be the very last thing that I would put my kid in. And it's not because of the danger, it's because of how boring football practices have become. And I'm watching these football practices, and here's my tips, right? Coaches, you got to get your kids out of lines, especially the younger ones. Your younger kids have an attention span of maybe about 10 minutes. And that's stretching it. That's really a 10-minute. If you can keep your kids engaged for 10 minutes, you're doing a fantastic job of being engaging. So get your kids out of lines. What I'm seeing at the youth level over and over again, right? I've got my kids standing in lines. They're waiting 5 minutes to get one rep. And I'm getting upset with my kids because they're jacking around in the back of the line. And what I do to solve that is I send them on a lap.
Wow.
I see football teams developing track teams or cross-country teams and masking it as we're disciplining. That is not how you discipline, not in football. Football, and the way I was taught football, the way I've been coaching football, is fun. It's high intensity, it's high speed, it's contact, it's all of those things. So going back to your point of having a practice plan, you've got to have a plan. Ideally, you need 4 coaches to have a successful football practice. And that allows you to break up the monotony of running plays over and over again. I'm not sure of the exact percentage, but I'm going to say 80% of a football practice should be on skill development at the youth level, not running plays. It doesn't matter what plays you run. What matters is how you do it. If you're a youth coach and you want to say, I want to be a spread team, fine, be a spread team. Doesn't matter. But you better teach the skills necessary to execute a spread offense, right? You got to be able to shotgun snap. You got to be able to catch a shotgun. You got to be able to catch footballs. You got to be able to run routes. You got to be able to pass protect. And it goes on and on and on. What I see so often is youth coaches line up. We run plays. They're chalkboard heroes, and every play is supposed to be a touchdown, but they're not giving our kids the skills to execute on game day. And then the kids are at fault. This leads me to my second point. Do not blame kids for their mishaps. Right. How often, Bubs, do you see a coach like, oh, I just don't have the talent. Oh, my kids aren't good enough. Your job as a coach at the very basic level of a coach is to get a player to a level that they couldn't get to themselves.
Correct.
There's a saying in football that says you're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. If it shows up on film, you're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. So when you think about that, you're just taking accountability for what's going on. A teacher in a classroom, right? If your kids aren't learning, you have to change.
Yep.
So when you go out there and you see what's happening, the kids aren't blocking, the kids aren't catching. Well, coach, you're not teaching it well.
Right. No, it's so true. And that's the thing, though, is like being able to evolve, right?
Mm-hmm.
like we talked about that, like making the adjustments, like we're talking about now, these halftime adjustments. And you're right, they'll beat the dead horse, so they'll have the excuse why. And anybody can do that. Anybody can, like a parent on the sideline can say, these are 5 things we need to do better. Like everyone, that's Captain Obvious, right? That is Coach Obvious right there.
You're just gonna give me my next one.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't want to get you your next one, but it's making the adjustments, man. You know,
Yeah.
be the coach that adjusts. It's okay.
Mhm.
Here's plan A, right? But the good coaches have plan B and C. You know, those are the good coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. My next point, please don't be Coach Obvious. Like I think this might, the lines are definitely in front of this, but the coach or the parent that screams on the sideline, you have to catch that ball or you have to block. You're not blocking. Like, no shit, coach. I'm not trying to miss the block. I'm not trying to drop the pass.
Right.
Teach
Yeah.
me. Help
Right.
me.
Teach me.
There,
No,
there's always something to correct, right? If a kid is dropping a pass, are their hands not extended? Are they not using their fingertips? Did they take their eyes off the ball? Did they let the ball get into their chest? There are a ton of things that happen when somebody drops a pass. If you missed a block, were you in proper stance when you first started? Where were your hands at? Where did your feet go?
Right.
Football is so complex, and I don't want to sound. I know I've been fortunate to be around great football coaches, and every one of them will say the same thing: is be persistent about your details and how you go about your work. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. You can go visit Oregon and think that running the spread offense is the way to go. And then you take a trip down to Air Force and watch them run the triple option, and you're like, oh no, that's the way to go. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. Pay attention to details. Teach skills before you get into whatever plays you're trying to run. You can go into a game at the youth level with 4 or 5 plays to the right and to the left, pass play, whatever, and you can be successful. It's not what you do, it's how you do it.
Totally agree. Like we talked about, you can, like I've seen it. Good football teams will say, "Hey, we're running right here." I've seen the great teams point, "This is where we're going, man." But we're going to do it so well, you're not going to be able to stop it. And how frustrating is that, right? But like you said, they do all of the detailed parts right, and they buy into what's going on, man. And I think the flip side of that, Jess, is having motivational leaders instructing that. You know, you got to be motivated as a head coach. You got to be motivated as an assistant coach, whether you're 100% into what's going on or not. I see a lot of guys at the youth level that are like, well, I kind of don't like this scheme. I kind of don't like that scheme, but this is what they want to run. I got to coach it. Like, kids are smart, man. They get that vibe if you're not bought in with what's going on. So if you're an assistant on staff, you're the assistant, man. You should 100% be supportive of whatever's going on. And if you don't like what's going on, that's something you talk about behind the scenes. I don't think you have bad body language while you're coaching the kids, you know?
Yeah.
I see sometimes with that, even at the facility, man. Like, I don't think we should hit a breaking ball this way. I don't like this drill. Well, come on, man. You're leading young adults. Like, you got to make sure you're bought into what's going on, and then they will be, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Enthusiasm. You can't do anything in life without enthusiasm, and especially if you're going to coach kids, you can't come out there and be the clear eyes guy. For dry, clear eyes. You can't be the clear eyes guy if you're going to be out there coaching any sport. It doesn't matter. But you also, you can't be the high strung yell all the time, because eventually your kids will tune you out. If you're constantly in a state of scream and yell, that's not leadership. Number one, leadership is not standing at the top of the hill and demanding that everybody does it, right? Leadership is bringing people with you. And there's a time there's a time to get upset, and that's when your core values aren't being demonstrated. And we'll get into core values in another topic, but when, just for example, we talked about being tough, and I talked about 4 to 6, A to B. If there's not effort going on, there's a time to raise your voice, right? Where's my effort? Where's my effort? It's caught my hands. So I think that's the art behind coaching. It's not just screaming and yelling, and that time is past. You mentioned old school. Our kids right now need some old school. Our kids need some old school. And there's a different way to go about it, right? If you can't, I think we were the last generation, or right on the fringe of the last generation, where the coach said jump and we were like, how high? I think we were still the how high guys. And now we've gotten to this, coach says jump, and you're like, why? Tell me why. what's in it for me? And you have to be able to supply that answer to a kid. If you can't tell them this is why we're doing it, this is why we do it this way, then you're not going to be able to get through to a kid.
Totally agree with you. If you're the guy that gets mad when they ask the why, then coaching is going to be a very hard road for you. With the generation that we're coaching now. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so here we are, Bubs. Let's get to let's wrap it up. Let's get to our suicide squeeze. And suicide squeeze, Bub, I'm gonna let you go ahead and just a message to coach. Maybe if there's a coach out there that has aspirations of being a high school coach or is just getting into coaching right now, is coaching their son or helping out, what type of advice would you give to an up and coming coach or somebody who has big aspirations as a coach?
Biggest aspiration as a coach is just, becoming a sponge, man, at all costs. I think a lot of the time, I mean, we're at a technology stage now where these guys can jump online for camps, clinics, being in person for everything possible. USA Baseball does a lot of online stuff. Guys, this is stuff that I do at the collegiate side. I can never get enough feedback, enough drills, enough terminology. But the biggest thing is just being you. I think that, Jess, like I have some guys that I consider mentors, but my flavor I'm confident with. And I think that's what a lot of youth coaches and up and coming coaches got to do. Don't be anybody else. You don't have to mimic your style to anybody. It's cool to get all of those versions, but put your own formula together, because your path and where you're coaching right now may be on the C level of the sixth grade basketball team, but your goal should be the best, sixth grade coach around. Have that mindset and always just be active. Know that, like I've said in the prior episodes, the kids that we're coaching nowadays do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. So know first and foremost that it is all about them. And I think, the sky's the limit, man. I was a guy that started in the inner city at a school that nobody wanted to be a part of, man. And the journey's been great because I've just surrounded myself with good coaches. I've always tried to get better at my craft, no matter where I was. I always bought into the community and knew it was always for the kids, man. And it's led me a good route.
Absolutely. My Hail Mary and anybody that's trying to get into football right now, I'm going to echo something that you said, and that's learn. There are too many resources out there for us to sit back and say, I know everything. And I go back to the Bobby Bowden quote, I know 40% of what there is to know about football. If we are sitting back and we know everything there is to know about football, we got to get out of it. If you are at that level where you can't accept new information and you're not applying new information, it's time to get out. So I'll start with that. But if you're looking to get into coaching, especially at the high school level, keep your record clean, fellas and ladies.
Yep, yeah, absolutely.
It's important because you're working with youth and everybody's doing background checks. So you got to keep the record clean. Put in the work. I think I go back to what you said about where you started and the job that you took. Me being a C team defensive coordinator, unpaid volunteer, there's some work that goes into. You're not entitled to anything, right? So find a program. If you're going to coach high school, find a program that meets what you want. Go learn, put in the work, do the little things necessary to become successful, and in that process, keep learning and learning and learning. And when it's your time to shine, shine. The other thing that I would say for start networking and developing a staff, because especially in football, right? I said at youth level, ideally, and to run a great practice, you got to have 4, but those 4 are going to fizzle out, right? You're going to need more people as you go through and you continue coaching. You're going to need to build a network of coaches who you trust. Because as a head coach, Buzz, and you can speak to this, if I don't have people around me that I trust, not only do I trust, but that can question me without me being upset, right? Challenge me, not question me, who can challenge me and challenge my thinking. And in that process, help me grow, then I'm stuck in that I know everything mode. And I'm throwing things out there and it's going to stick whether I like it or not. So make sure that you're really putting in the work.
I think that's fair, Jess. You're right. It is a process, man. We're not winning Cracker Jack contests to be head high school coaches or coach at the collegiate level. It's a journey. Definitely know that there's going to be time away. And the biggest thing is just volunteer, man. I think right now at the high school level, if you're really bought into doing stuff, go volunteer somewhere. They're never going to turn you down,
And the reality, Bubs, is even if you're getting paid at high school, unless you're at one of the private schools or something, you're volunteering. Like even if
100%.
even if you're getting one of those
money.
Yeah,
man. We're
if you're
losing
getting
money to the coach.
Yeah, if you're getting one of those stipends, it's not glitz and glam. We're not in Texas. Maybe one day we get there, but we're not there yet. And so you're doing it. I hope on some level, if you get into coaching, whatever sport it is, number one, you have a passion for the sport, because you got to have a passion for the sport, like Peyton Manning type passion, right? He gave his Hall of Fame speech and all he did was a promotion for football. That's passion for the sport. And then you have to have a love for youth and for kids, not just your own kid, but every other kid that's out there.
Totally agree. Just know that it's in that order also, and then everything else falls into place outside of that if you really buy into it. The wins and losses, those columns will take care of themselves if you have the right steps in place.
Yep. And then and again, this is going to be a whole topic, but as far as like knowing who you are, develop some core values from an athletic standpoint, from the sport you're coaching, some core values there, and then some personal core values that you can tie them together, because it makes making decisions a lot easier, hard decisions, right? When you're tied to some values that you're hanging on to, and this is what your program is all about. When you make tough decisions, when it comes down to making tough decisions, it's a lot easier when this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is how we do it.
100%. Establish those early.
Yep. All right, Bubs.
Well, cool, Jess. Another good one, man.
You have a good night. Coach them up.
No doubt.
Thank you for listening to the Colorado Coach 'em Up podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please send them to coloradocoachem@gmail.com. Once again, that is Colorado, COACHEM up @gmail.com.